how do you define failure, right? Failure is inextricably linked to ego.
On our paths, in our careers and in our homes, we don't ever deal with a straight road. There are highs, there are lows, there are moments when things don't go the way you want them to go.
And at the time, we were told we weren't going to amount to anything, right? We were told by financial institutions, we were told by big advertising agencies. Everybody was telling us, listen,
You were a risk to invest
research,
in.
yeah,
You were a risk
yeah,
to
we're
give
like, no.
advertising dollars to.
They would tell you, research tells us that you will amount to nothing. All of you males are either going to die or go to jail before your 30th, and all the girls are going to have children and they're going to flood the township with children. That's it. That's the end of your life.
You have a gift of kind of seeing a range in culture in layers that people don't.
So you can never fail in something that hadn't been defined before. That which is not meant to, nourish your spirit should not be considered as failure.
In that moment of realizing that I am failing at my marriage, finding silver lining in that was really like impossible.
People are very happy to be where they are, where you are concerned, where they've kind of looked at you as, oh no, this is this guy's downfall. Like that's trample on the person. You never know who your true tribe is.
No.
Right. Your tree is gonna be hit by a hurricane for you to see how many leaves remain and how many stems stay.
Yeah.
And those that fall off, again, I've learned not to cry because all they're doing is just falling on my feet to nourish the ground that I'm standing and for me to grow again.
Greg,
Hey.
it is so beautiful to have you at the Cheers to Failure podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. First one.
I know, right?
What an
I'm
honor.
so glad,
What
and
an
I
honor.
appreciate you so much. This podcast is not an easy conversation. However, it is a necessary conversation.
Absolutely.
And I felt that on our paths, in our careers and in our homes, we don't ever deal with a straight road. There are highs, there are lows, there are moments when things don't go the way you want them to go.
Yeah.
And I want us to talk about those moments.
Okay.
And hence, it's Cheers to Failure.
Yeah.
What made you say yes?
Well, first is you, right? We've known each other for a very long time, and I think one of the things that has been evident in our relationship is having each other's sixes. So when you said you are launching this thing, and potentially I was the first guest, I was like, it's not rocket science. But the second thing to your point,
I appreciate that.
The second thing to your point, we always talk about conversations need to be had, blah blah blah, blah but we say that on social media or at dinners, and then we all disappear. So I guess this is an opportunity to change.
To just deal with it. Let's do it.
Absolutely.
Let's normalize failure. You work in industries that a lot of us wish we could live in every day. You work with the arts, you work with music, you work with food, you work with wine. And in such industries, when failures happen, they become very public displays. How do you navigate that, given the type of business you do?
Well, there are a couple of things. I think first, I think, how do you define failure, right? Mm-hmm. And I always say, at what stage of my life do you want me to tell you how I define failure? Because when I was 13, how I defined failure was different to when I was 18, to when I was 25, to when I'm now in my 50s. I'm 51 now.
Yeah.
And I see it differently, right? So obviously at 13, it wasn't, the failures weren't public. It was kind of like, there's this girl I really like, and I'm going to wait for her because I know they sent her for bread at this time. I'm going to say this, she'll say this, and then, we'll have a little date. And then she won't come that day, and I'll consider that failure.
Yeah.
Or she will come and she will not respond as how I imagined, and I consider that failure. So at a young age, failure is completely different.
Or she comes at the wrong time and you get into trouble with your parents.
Correct. But in your 30s, let's say, right, you still have a different definition of what failure is. And sometimes it is driven by what society tells you failure is.
Yeah.
Right? Because, in that age, you're still responding to, what will people say or how will people perceive this thing, et cetera, et cetera. And then you grow up some more and then you realize that nobody cares, right?
Nobody important, at
nobody's
least.
nobody's thinking
No
about
one
you.
significant in your life cares.
Nobody
Yeah.
thinks about you in
Yeah.
the ways that you think
Yeah.
they think about you. Small anecdote. I was in my years at YFM. There was a stage where YFM was at its peak, right? I mean, it was buzzing. The revolution was at its highest. And I remember making a remark to a couple of people. I said to them, this thing is so huge. I don't think there's a single young person in this province who will say they don't know us.
Yeah.
They may not listen.
Yeah.
But nobody can say they don't know us.
Yeah.
It was a
And
little bit of-
you hired big names
it
too.
was
You hired big names.
It was a
yeah.
little bit of an arrogant statement,
Yeah.
right? Because we were riding quite high. Listen, the universe answered me that week. I kid you not, right? I met people who had never heard of us,
Oh, really?
who didn't even know what YFM was,
Yeah.
and these were people who were squarely our target market.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So that humbled me a bit, right? Because then again, I thought, wait, where have we failed? Why have we not reached these people?
That audience. Yeah.
That audience.
Yeah.
And then I realized again that failure is inextricably linked to ego, right?
Oh,
so anything that bruises your ego, you see it as failure, right? And not understanding that ego in itself is something you need to regulate,
Yeah.
right? And something you need to balance.
Yeah.
Right? So
I think also, like, in the space of ego, you start to compare yourself when you are in your 20s and 30s. You compare yourself to your peers.
no, absolutely.
And I think we are highly, highly, highly impacted by that. Then the ego is like, I haven't reached that stage.
Correct.
Look at the others. They're already here. They're already CEOs of organizations.
Yeah.
But what you accomplished with YFM at a very young age was incredible.
It was amazing. I mean, we had incredible teams that we worked with. We were trusted. I often refer to our CEO at YFM was Dirk Hartford. And Dirk Hartford trusted me with the most important revolution
Yeah.
of the time, the biggest responsibility, and I took it on, and I was a young person, right? Which is why my love and affinity to young people today is such that if I was given that opportunity at such a young age, where do I get off not respecting young people today and giving them an ear?
Yeah. And at that point, then, I think, was failure not something you feared? Because given the bravery of the decision to appoint you, to give you a chance, and also the fact that you were part of culture in such a big way, where was that voice in your head that says, "Hey, if you mess this up, Greg,
So
there will be eyes on you"?
the beauty about YFM at the time was we weren't looking at it as a business. I think initially we you get into a space and you get told, well, this is the format. There's advertisers, there's all sorts of things, and then once you're in, you realize that, hang on a second, this is different, right? For starters, the environment within which we find ourselves is not welcoming, right? So young black people in media was unheard of, right?
Yeah.
We were still in super deep, racially divided South Africa. Not that we've moved any far further. We're still there. And at the time, we were told we weren't going to amount to anything, right? We were told by financial institutions, we were told by big advertising agencies. Everybody was telling us, listen,
you were a risk to invest
research,
in. You were a risk to give
Research,
advertising dollars to.
They would tell you, research tells us that you will amount to nothing. All of you males are either going to die or go to jail before your 30th. And all the girls are going to have children, and they're going to flood the township with children. That's it. That's the end of your life. So at that time, failure was not an option. right? Because what I was chasing and what we were chasing as a team was far bigger than personal egos,
Yeah.
and I think that's what made YFM so powerful at
Yeah.
that time. It
Yeah.
was that we had a collective purpose,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
where you have a collective purpose, egos are never present,
Yeah.
and therefore failure is not it's not even a discussion,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But also, you can never fail in something that hadn't been defined before.
Well, I mean, I think that is the beauty of being ahead of a trend,
Yeah.
which is what you do so well. I think you have a gift of kind of seeing a range in culture in layers that people don't.
Yeah.
But I think also in that
Thank you.
very confident stepping into your zone,
Yeah.
whether it's through food, through entertainment, through the arts, then you've got to believe in whatever is driving you inside.
Yeah.
And so like then I can imagine the role of people that you call your tribe
Yes.
being very important.
Absolutely, and it's now understanding that in now this quest of redefining, you know, failure, you've got to define your society,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because if you're just dealing with society,
Yeah.
J blank,
Yeah.
you're dealing with energies you have no
Yeah.
idea,
Yeah.
where they come from or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
But when you've defined your society, your environment, your tribe, your squad, they can guide you through what may seem as failures, because failures are really lessons
Yeah.
in life,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
These are, I think, we tend to associate, like I was saying earlier, failure, ego, and disappointment, right? And we kind of confuse these terms
Yeah.
and these states of mind, and all these
Yeah.
things are actually very separate.
Yeah.
And it's important to understand that which is not meant to, nourish your spirit should not be considered as failure, really.
So they do say that there are failures you should see sometimes as a gift and a blessing.
Yes.
But in the moment that such failures occur, like, so I am happily in a relationship now, I'm divorced, I've been divorced for years. In that moment of realizing that I am failing at my marriage,
Yeah.
finding silver lining in that was really like impossible.
Yeah.
Because obviously of just like you don't step into a relationship like that
Yeah.
intending for it to end.
Yes.
And then you have the gift of time.
Yeah.
Several years later, I have met a new partner. I am very happy.
Yeah.
So like, do you have a failure that was catastrophic for you in that moment that has been a blessing in disguise? Because I can just imagine like it's got to be what has kind of given you fuel
Yeah.
to get into business in the way that you have.
So, yeah, I mean, I've had moments I could define as failures, and I think one of them in the business environment has been that I am never wrong with talent.
You are never wrong.
I'm never wrong with talent
You till today.
to this day,
Okay.
but I was wrong with people.
Oh gosh.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
And there was a point I assumed that talent equals great person. And I didn't realize
Yeah.
that, people who are punks can also be very talented,
And you've got to know like to separate those two.
And right?
Yeah.
And so my assumption was always that talent goes to good people, people who will hold you, right? People who will sit with you and say, listen, we see a storm brewing, and we want to shift you away from the storm, right? I mean, there was a joke this is a joke really, but I used to say to my teams at Kaya FM now, years later, was, if I have an encounter with one person, right, and we, have a conversation in my office, and I'm like, very mad about something, and they didn't do something, and I'm like dealing with that issue. And then somebody else comes and we have a similar conversation. But in that conversation too, I'm actually the one that's wrong because I misunderstood something. When those two meet in the pause area and both of them realize that they are upset, about something I've said to them, or like they've just come out of a really hot scolding meeting, right? What will never happen is that conversation between them, one of them saying to the other, no, well, actually, he was right to tell you
In that
rubbish,
way, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Half the time it's kind of like people tend to agree that I'm the one that's that's bad.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And as a leader, usually
You know.
you take a lot of that.
Absolutely.
A lot of the people that work with you and
Yeah.
around you kind of attributing judgment,
Correct.
especially when it comes to uncomfortable conversations.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely, you know.
yeah.
So that's kind of like where I started to, and you see it and you ignore it, right? And you think, you know what, this is, with peaks and troughs, and you start to find excuses for it. But the truth is, you've always got to interrogate people first,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then
Talent
talent
later.
afterwards.
Yeah. So what are your lessons then specifically around people, the people that work well so that Greg's plans are least likely to fail, or the people who are willing to take the risk with you,
Yeah.
so that even if the plans fail,
Yeah.
the experience and the journey has been worth it? What kind of people are those for you?
I think it starts with what kind of person am I? Because again, the most important question to ask is, what was my role in this thing, right? So if there's if there's an issue, if there's an altercation, something happens and things blow up, right? Instead of being in the defense, so that was my first lesson. Don't be in the defense. Ask the question: what is my role in this thing? How did I? Right. The second
Reflection.
exactly. Then the second thing is it a situation to remedy, right? Because again, I've had to walk away from people, right? And not that I don't like them anymore, but their spirits are just not aligned with mine. I lied to myself all these years, thinking, no, I'm good with this guy, And even though something happens, you're like, what was that? But I'm good with this guy. I'm good with this lady, So there's all these things that you learn. And I mean, building confidence in people is the pressure is on you to be amazing, right, as a person, to be amazing as a leader, to understand what your role is as a leader. Leadership is not about being the smartest person in the room, as cliched as that sounds, but leadership is about creating an environment for people to flourish, right? You must have smarter people around you who are helping you move and navigate, right? But they must be good people, so they understand that their brightness is not about overtaking anything. It's it's a team, right? You the striker, great. You the goalie, fantastic. Let's all play our parts. So there is there has been failures, for instance, on my part in building those teams, right? And I've had instances where I've had like 4 strikers. If it's a football match, kind of 4 strikers.
You've overcated in that department.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you find that you constantly have to go in and move things around.
Do you find it easy to admit you have failed in appointing talent, the right talent? Or do you keep giving people a chance? Like,
I have. I don't want to lie. I've given people lots of chances. I've dealt with many challenges from a young age, right? And it's anything from people who had personal problems at home to people who had to deal with substance abuse, to people who had to deal with relationships and all kinds of things. When you're a leader in an environment, and there's a there's a thing about a black culture in a corporate, right, that is still trying to find its way, right? And in an environment where, I had the opportunity to be a leader, so I had an opportunity to say, how do we make this familiar to how we were socialized? Because socialization is a big issue,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But in doing that, you run the risk of people taking advantage of you, right? Because, if I say, oh man, so and so is complaining about, or not complaining, but they've had a death in their family. The very first thing that used to come to my mind is, okay, I don't have this person for the next month.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
I don't have them for 1 month.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
While
I was actually thinking for a week. I wasn't
Yeah.
thinking
No,
for a month,
it's a
but
month.
it's a month. Why is it a month?
It's a month.
Why does a death in the family equal absence from work? A month. Being a month.
And it's not it's not a physical absence.
Yes.
So
Okay.
yeah, it's not a physical
Okay.
absence.
Okay.
It's a both physical and
Okay, got you.
and mental, right?
Yeah.
So in most black distorted, and I use the word distorted deliberately because this is not culture.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
This was circumstance.
Yes.
People wait 7 days in the majority
Yeah.
for burial,
Yeah.
right? Because people have to come from all over town, whatever.
Yeah.
You couple that with a cleansing ceremony. Your person is not present, right? For a month, they're not present. As opposed to in other races, people can like move on in the next
Yeah.
3 days. Not that they've moved on mentally
No.
and spiritually, but they're done with the event,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like some of these things that happen in our society, they take longer, right? And by no fault, and sometimes a person will come to work, right?
Yeah.
And you have to understand that they are at work just to get away from
The situation.
at
yeah.
home, the teas
Yeah.
and the sugars
Yeah.
and the things that have to be
Scones.
bought. Scones, people coming to cry all the time. Like,
Yeah.
I'm tired of crying, man. Just
Yeah.
can somebody
Yeah.
And so when you deal with people who are socialized in a particular way, and you are now in a corporate environment, right, that says, well, 3 days for this, and you never get the best out of people, right? Do you say as a leader, I know that person is struggling with X, Y, Z, let's help them with the following things, right? The resources from the business.
Yeah.
And then you find others saying, oh, that's such a beautiful gesture, but when I had a death in my family, I didn't get this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have to deal with all those things. And I
Yeah.
think part of my failure and success was seeking to create a completely different corporate environment, right? And I don't even like the word corporate, right? Because that is,
Why don't you like it?
by definition, corporates are so there's rules
Yes.
that are ignorant to your socialization,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
There's rules that force you to change who you are. I can tell you now, and we take these things for granted. So people say, oh, my English bundles are finished today.
But okay.
Right?
Yeah.
As an example.
Yeah.
That's a real frustration.
Yeah.
We joke about it.
Yeah.
But, English is my fourth language.
Yeah.
It's not my first language.
Yeah.
Right? Actually, my fifth language. Right? But this is a language that I need to master to do my job. Or is it?
And the codes
You know.
that come with how you behave in that
Correct.
space are codes that are created from a completely different
Absolutely. Right.
era and time
And this
in
is
our
why
history.
there's
yeah.
always loggerheads. And
Yeah.
this creates a situation where, you find what I call corporate snakes. So people that go and learn that thing so well, just so they can,
Apply it and yeah.
horrible.
So tell me about your parents and how they feel about like your ability to navigate failure in the way that you have. And I know mom and dad are gone.
Yeah.
And you did a tribute post. How do you imagine they're feeling about your resilience, your determination, your grit, your like entrepreneurial spirit that really no one can put down.
I'll tell you a little story about my excitement. One time I had gotten an increase at YFM. I'm so excited. I'm going to show my mom and dad my payslip. Right. So I get there. And my dad is there, my mom wasn't there. So I was like, Enfitu. We had this very cordial relationship. Like, Enfitu, it's like, "Ooh, let me show you something. So I'm like, look, man, I just got an increase. I'm so happy. Like, it means they're happy with my work.
Yes.
Da, da, da.
Yeah.
My dad stared at that for like a good 5 minutes in silence, right? And I saw tears building in his eyes. And he said to me, your mother and I combined have never made this money,
Sure.
right? But I could also see a pride in him, like he was so proud, that, it's legit money. I mean, where I come from,
It's legit.
where I come from, there's
it's legit money. Yeah.
It can be other money.
Everything.
This one comes through the bank.
Yes. Yes. All paperwork is available for tracking.
But I was lucky in that the combination of mom and dad. Mom was she was an activist in her work. She was a Kosatu hardcore 80s kind of Kosatu human, very much involved in the unions, very much. My mother was the person when the late great Chris Hani was assassinated. CNN went to her to go ask her how she feels. So she was that person. My dad, on the other hand, was the arts guy, right? So whilst he had a day job, at a cleaning company, he and his friends from back in the day had they used to produce theatrical pieces, and and so forth.
Really?
So on this end, I'm surrounded by all this music, all this theatrical pieces, and these amazing artistic life. On this other hand, I'm surrounded by the consciousness of politics and so forth and so forth. So that combination, I think, built a lot of courage in me, but also my own personal experiences. I experienced racism at a very young age, and so I was always very aware of what's going on, from a very young age. So I'm very happy that they did that for me, that they exposed us to what was, right? And to say, this is not normal, this is not real. Yes, we do have a home, yes, we work hard, yes, we do all these things, but this is not where it ends. They taught me and my siblings to cross the street and see what's on the other side. So I've always been that guy who says, okay, this is where we are, but what's happening across the highway there? And so I'm very grateful for that.
And they would be applauding right now and just, I'm sure, really proud.
Absolutely. I mean, if when I just think about stories I would tell when I come, and I'd sit with them and like, oh, this is what's happened today, and we're looking at doing this. They're looking at you like, damn, boy, amazing.
The bravery, I think, and the drive for your gift, and it's the combination of both their worlds, actually, because you still brought that political consciousness to the radio product you shaped, and how you influenced what now has become normal as part of conversations in the arts, etc.
Yeah, and I mean, I realized the significance of it, even though it wasn't as clear at that young age, but I realized the significance of the arts. I often say to people, the arts is our way out, as a people, right? We just got to understand, learn how we nurture that part of us. This is an art form. Storytelling is an art form. This is how we've always
always done it.
Done it and progressed. We shouldn't be afraid to embrace that which was interrupted of us, because now we are allowing ourselves to live through the interruptions.
And as a parent, what do you teach your kids about failure?
That it's necessary. that it will happen, that it isn't the end of the world. That is a lesson, right? And that you don't wallow in it. You know, it's a
You don't
moment.
wallow, yeah.
No, it's a
Yeah.
moment. You know,
Yeah.
I was saying when I spoke to another one of our friends, DJ Fresh, the other day, we spoke about, you know, I said pity parties are the
Yes, I saw the elephant.
The
But
elephant in the room.
I love how you do that, because where I have found my power
Yeah.
is to own the story of
Yes.
when I have failed.
Yeah.
And you do the same. What is often surprising is how people don't expect us to own the narrative of those,
Yeah.
of the things we encountered that went great at the time.
Yeah.
How do people respond to you when you just like, hey, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Here's what happened there, and here's why it happened, and whatever. Not that you owe anyone an explanation,
No.
by the way.
So no. So I mean, so you must understand this thing goes in stages,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And by the way, I'm at a stage now where I now realize it was not a failure, that thing, because people confuse these things, right? So what happens in the public space?
Yeah.
So you get accused of all these things, and you're a poster boy of all this nonsense for a while, and people are forming their own opinions, and in the whole process, you are quiet. You say nothing, right? Because what do you say, right? Because nothing you say will change people's minds. People are very happy to be where they are, where you are concerned, where they've kind of looked at you as, oh no, this is this guy's downfall. Like that's trample on the person. So in my case, when I had quite a public thing with Kaya, I had to separate these things, right? I said Kaya was not a failure for me. We grew that business.
You
from,
did.
so
Multiple awards,
if you follow the numbers,
radio station of the year,
right,
multiple awards.
the
You did
evidence is very
brilliantly,
clear,
yeah.
right? In terms of
Yeah.
the work we did,
Yeah.
the lives we improved, the value we gave back to clients. There's no argument, right? The other stuff was gray area stuff, right? Where it's like, well, I mean, it's my word against yours type of thing. One of the worst things is that having to deal with a gray area matter like sexual harassment, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And people know that that's going to hurt you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And the system has decided.
Right? Yeah,
And the
right.
system
And
has
once that
decided.
is
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
you can shout as much as you want, right? My whole thing was, do you sleep at night? And I did, right? I slept at night because
Yeah.
I knew who I am. I knew what I did and did not do. And so you can't, it's not my role to convince you.
Yeah.
Otherwise.
Yeah. So
right?
I went through a moment after getting dismissed. I went through a moment where I could not go to an area where my previous employer's offices are,
Yeah.
because I just felt so overwhelmed with shame.
Yeah.
But what was great is to find the tribe.
Yeah.
And you and Brenda being among those that just surrounded me with love and with compassion and support in a way that kind of is constructive
Yes.
for me to get my strength to step outside and talk about my story.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it was the same for us. Brenda and I spent 2 years out of work. You have children, you've got mortgages, there's cars, there's all these things, right? And it was the worst time because then there was COVID. As
Yeah.
well, right?
Yeah.
So you go through, and that's why I know that Brenda is my G, man.
Oh,
Like, listen,
she's just incredible.
Listen,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
you don't come out of that, easy. You gotta have someone who backs you up, and what makes that situation worse is that she was a part of,
Sure, I know.
the
Yeah,
mess.
part
And a
of
lot
the
of it was,
story, yeah.
people focus on you because,
Yeah.
because of your name and
Yeah.
whatever. But,
Yeah.
but she was just as hurt by that process,
Yeah.
just as targeted,
Yeah.
just as attacked,
Yeah.
right, as I was.
Yeah.
And I guess that thing was, okay, well, both of you are also going through a bit of a test here. So forget society.
Yeah.
Let's see how strong
Yeah.
your
You guys
relationship is.
are,
Do you-
yeah, and your family,
What
the
were you doing
kids.
with? I don't, you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
are you standing for what you did?
Yeah.
And it was in a weird way, an opportunity to choose to go through a furnace with someone, right? And we did that, and we chose each other,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And we went through it.
Yeah.
The other powerful thing, you talk about tribes. I have friends, right, who would say, okay, so we know you're not working, no problem. How's your bond, right? You're like, hey man, I've had to liquidate that, I've had to do this. Okay, no shop. But I got this, don't worry. Yeah. How are the kids at school? Oh, kids are cool. Okay, you must let me know if anything. These are my friends. This is my
Yeah.
tribe. These are people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
One of my sons was
Yeah.
overseas. One of my other friends tours a lot, and he was like, "No, let me know because I'm there." When. So, again, did I fail? No, I learned
Yeah.
something. I learned who my tribe was.
Yeah.
Right. In that big flourishing moment, you never know who your true tribe is.
No.
Right. Your tree has got to be hit by a hurricane
Yeah.
for you to see how many leaves remain
Yeah.
and how many stems stay.
Yeah.
And those that fall off, again, I've
Are meant to.
I've learned not to cry because
Yeah.
all they're doing is just falling on my feet to nourish the ground
Yeah.
that I'm standing
Yeah.
on and for me to grow again.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the attitude had to shift.
Yeah.
It had to change. Had to confront my ego. I've had to deal with, like, I don't want to see, I don't want to, and if, what, but then I thought to myself, there was a stage where I said to Brenda, listen, I'm done working with women, right? I can't. After what I've been put through, I'm good.
Yeah.
She laughs, she looks at me and she says, oh, okay. So where is it that you're going to work then? Right? And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, no, that's, those are your emotions talking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And are you suggesting that, everybody's bad? And I thought, okay, you're right. But I need a break. She was
Yeah.
like, get a break.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
don't let things change you.
Yeah, yeah. I find for me, when you go through that level of a test,
Yeah.
the leader you come out as is completely different.
Absolutely.
I have such a lot of care about handling difficult conversations, but I also understand that when people are going through such challenging and public failures, that the one thing I can do is not to contribute to gossip. Don't contribute to the whispers that are happening behind the scenes, because you are adding negative energy to a situation
Absolutely.
that is already so difficult for the person.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
again, gossip. It's like the very nature of the word. Like it's not designed for anything else.
There's no
but
good intention in gossip. There's no good intention.
End of story.
Yeah,
End of story.
yeah.
But yeah, I think things happen to you, so you could learn out of the situation. B, so you can question as well. What was my role in this thing? How did I, and the Kaya story goes far deeper and far higher than people think. And again, I don't care to talk about it, right? But I was glad that I eventually knew how it all starts, and where it all rolls from.
Yeah, I've never gotten to know.
Yeah, I know.
I've never gotten to know. And we were talking the other day about having battles with creatures and characters you don't know. But oh my God, we have to end our conversation. We could go on and on and on. We have to wrap up by talking about maybe your 3 things that you feed your soul when you are in a moment of failure. I know you love the art. I know you love the music.
Yep.
I know you love the cigars. And you love cooking.
All the bad
So
habits.
what are your 3 things that are like instrumental in helping your energy be lighter?
So the first is redefining that failure in my head and reframing it, and understanding that I belong not to society, but I belong to myself, right? And I'm accountable
Yeah.
to myself in my own actions. That's the first thing. Second thing is my tribe, my little people, right, are the reason I wake up every day. There are people that you are doing this for and with, right? And obviously extended family. And then lastly, I think, again, I can't ignore the fact that the world requires all of us to do something for someone. And that carries on, right, in my spirit, in spite of, some of the interruptions that I've experienced. So in the work that I do now, and I'm so blessed to have, a plethora of clients who are about that as well. It's just a wonderful place to be.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's the wrap. Our first episode on Cheers to Failure with Greg Maloka. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please won't you do me a favor? Click the subscribe button as well as the notifications button so you know when we've got new content on our YouTube channel. And share it with your friends, whoever you believe needs to know that failure doesn't mark the end, but is filled with beautiful, glorious lessons we all need to have. Thank you.